going to try this again. Unfortunately, my video froze while I was filming this. And I've missed 2 Rpgadays now at this point because it's after midnight on the 18th, and I've missed the 16th and 17th. The 16th was a bad day for me, just didn't get around to it, had a lot going on, wasn't mentally up for it. Today, or rather yesterday, the 17th, I spent a lot of time with a friend I've not gotten to spend time with in a long time. We had some fun playing the Atomic Highway role-playing game. He played it for the first time. I love the game. I love the kind of build it yourself setting. And I, switched some gears and let him have a lot of fun, just investigating stuff. And it was a cool game. And that kept me from doing much today. Now, day 16 of the Rpgaday challenge is what is a game you most want. That's hard for me because there are 2 games that are on the top of my list that are games that I really badly want that I do not have. One of them is a game I've tried to play twice but have not gotten the opportunity. I made the character but things fell through. The other one is a game that I've seen advertised on Google Plus, and I've listened to a Q&A or read the Q&A with one of the creators, and it just sounds like a fun game. And that is the Mindjammer role-playing game. That's the first one. I really want the Mindjammer game. I love Fate. I like transhuman stuff, and I think the 2 can work very well together. And I just wasn't inspired by Nova Praxis because I don't particularly like Strands of Fate. It's too much like other games. And if I want Fate, I want something that's not too much like other games. I don't want a constrained structure that you build like GURPS or Big Eye Small Mouth used to have. I don't want a point-by structure. I want Fate. I want aspects and skill pyramids, and I like it for its fluidity and its amorphous nature that you can kind of, it's got structure, but it's just flexible enough that you can fit a lot of things into it. And that's why I'm looking forward to Mindjammer. I just haven't had the money for it yet. The other one, which I've made characters for twice, or rather made one and then had the GM make the other because I told him what I wanted, because he was in many ways the first character slightly altered since the campaign was different. And that is Iron Kingdoms. And I really want to play Iron Kingdoms and give it a try. I have not moved into a lot of the Steam games. I don't want to call it punk because they're not really punk. But a lot of it is because I don't like the traditional races, the fantasy races that are in a lot of steampunk games. I'm like, you can do something without elves and dwarves. And if you're going to do elves, do fae. Do full-on crazy, creepy, weird fae to oppose all that steam tech and iron and everything else. But nobody's done that yet, or that I've seen. But Iron Kingdoms did it fairly early on. I don't think the D20 stuff was very good. But as time has gone on, and as they've made their miniatures, and they made their miniature game, and they've moved out a bit, it has created a much more interesting setting for those fantasy races with the steam tech. Because it's not just our world with steampunk and then the fantasy races added on. And it's not a pastiche of our world with fantasy races added on. It's its own fantasy world that just happens to have reached steam technology. And that creates a rather interesting play element, especially since it is in fairly wide use for some of the militaries and other things like that. And so I do like Iron Kingdoms. Now, Rpgaday 17, which I'm also doing in this video to catch me up, is supposed to be the funniest game you've ever played. And I've played games that were meant for humor purposes. And to tell you the truth, not a single one of the humor role-playing games I've played has ever worked for me. Because the humor has been entirely too forced. I much prefer in-character humor. I much prefer dry humor myself, although I don't mind some absurdity and craziness either, and silliness. It just depends on where it comes from. I don't want the rules or the setting to impose it. I want it to come from the extemporaneous, with that word. I'm not going to try and repronounce it at the moment. My brain's not wrapping around it. But I want it to come from play. And that has only happened in a couple games. And my favorite one was a Marvel Saga, that is Marvel Superheroes Adventure Role-Playing Game, the card-powered Marvel game, the second Marvel game ever, superhero game ever created. And we made characters. A couple people hadn't played it before. I played it and run it, but it was fairly new at the time. And a friend ran it, and the absurd stuff that comes up when you're playing and you think about things that they don't think about in comic books. Like, I had a character who transformed into a griffin. So he turns into this big half lion, half eagle thing. And the fact that, in comic books they're not going to show anything, but in the real world, I was naked. And that created some humorous moments when people realized, hey, you don't have any pants. Now, some comic books have taken that into account over years. It's like, where are your pants kind of comments. But that makes for interesting play because it wasn't forced upon by rules. It was just a moment where somebody realized, hey, wait a minute, that's a guy who turns into that and he doesn't have clothes on. Like, what clothes would you get for a half lion, half eagle anyway? But that's kind of a situation that came up, and that wasn't the only thing. There was talks of the different things we could do to spying. There was an in-character Wonder Twins joke because one character could shapeshift into different liquid metal things because thanks to Terminator 2, we've got that liquid metal thing going on. And so we got a Wonder Twins joke out of him for that. But it fit the characters who both had grown up on comic books and who had been given superpowers and realized just how weird some of the tropes are for themselves. So they lampshaded some of it, not necessarily consciously, but just in play. And it was a funny game. We were laughing. It was great. And I prefer that. I prefer natural humor that comes from the characters and the situations they're in than to some sort of mechanical force or mechanical farce in the rule systems or mechanics. Because I've seen games that are supposed to be funny and they always seem to fall flat from it. But in this case, the natural humor came forth and it was a lot more fun. Anyway, I will be back again tomorrow, or later today actually, to do more of this RPG Day number 18. But for now, peace and good gaming.